The sun was setting, casting long, slanted shadows over the city skyline as Ethan sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling. The letter from his lawyer lay on the polished wood, the words smudged by the sweat on his palms. Divorce papers. After all these years of marriage, after everything they had built together, the laughter, the plans, the dreams, everything was about to crumble, all because of her betrayal. It had been months since he first suspected something was wrong. Small signs at first, late nights at work, unexplained absences, the flicker of her phone screen late at night, turned quickly away when he entered the room. But it wasn't until he had found the messages, intimate, undeniable messages, that his world shattered. He had confronted Sarah, his wife of 12 years, with the cold proof in hand. Her tear-streaked face and trembling lips couldn't save her then. She had admitted it. An affair. A one-time mistake, she had claimed, with a co-worker. But Ethan knew there was no undoing what had been done. He had packed his bags that night. He took only what he needed, leaving behind the home they had shared, the memories they had created. What gutted him the most wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the cold confession. It was the look on his daughter's face as he kissed her goodbye. Emma, their bright, cheerful 5-year-old who had no idea why her father was leaving.
She doesn't need to know.
Sarah had said softly.
Not yet.
But now, as he stared at the legal documents, everything seemed more real, more final. Divorce was one thing. Losing Emma was another. The thought of leaving her in the care of the woman who had torn their family apart was unbearable. He had spoken to his lawyer just days ago. Full custody, he had said, his voice firm, unwavering. I want full custody of Emma. Sarah's unfit. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman with years of courtroom battles behind her, had nodded but warned him. You need to be prepared. Custody battles aren't easy. She'll fight back. She might have her own accusations. Be ready for anything. He had been ready, or so he thought, but nothing could have prepared him for the storm that was about to come. The courtroom was colder than he had expected. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and nervous sweat. Ethan sat at the plaintiff's table, hands clenched into fists beneath the surface, as Sarah entered the room with her lawyer, a smug-looking man in an expensive suit. She didn't meet Ethan's gaze as she took her seat, her eyes fixed on the table, her lips tight. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, called the proceedings to order, her voice echoing in the nearly empty room. Ethan's lawyer rose first, stating the case clearly, firmly. Infidelity, the breach of trust, the impact on their child. Mr. Thompson is prepared to provide a stable, loving home for Emma, she concluded. He has been her primary caregiver since the separation. Mrs. Thompson's affair, her betrayal of the family, clearly shows that she is unfit to maintain custody. Ethan glanced at Sarah, hoping for a flicker of regret, but her face was unreadable. When her lawyer stood, there was a quiet intensity to his voice that made the hair on the back of Ethan's neck stand up. Your Honor, the man began, there is more to this case than just a simple affair. The truth is far more complex and far more devastating. Ethan's stomach twisted. We have evidence, the lawyer continued, that the child, Emma, is not biologically Mr. Thompson's. The words hung in the air like a bomb, shattering the fragile silence. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, the blood rushing to his ears. Not his? Sarah's face was pale. Her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her knuckles white. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is this true, Mrs. Thompson? She asked quietly. Sarah nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. It's true. Ethan felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath him. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white as his vision blurred with rage and disbelief. What the hell are you talking about? He hissed, his voice barely restrained. Sarah finally turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't know how to tell you. It was a mistake I made years ago, before we were even married. Ethan recoiled as if struck. Years ago? Before they were married? His mind raced. trying to piece together the timeline. How had he missed it? How had he believed for all these years that Emma was his little girl, only to find out now, like this, that it was all a lie? "I didn't know," Sarah continued, her voice shaking. "I didn't know until after she was born. And by then I couldn't tell you. I couldn't hurt you like that." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Ethan's ragged breathing. His lawyer placed a hand on his arm, trying to calm him, but his mind was a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and confusion. The judge spoke again, her voice calm but firm. "We will need to conduct a paternity test to confirm these claims. In the meantime, both parties will have shared custody of the child until a decision can be made." The days that followed were a blur for Ethan. He moved through them like a ghost, haunted by the knowledge that the little girl he had loved, cared for, and cherished for 5 long years wasn't his. The paternity test was a formality at this point, but it didn't make the waiting any easier. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat, he couldn't think of anything but Emma, his Emma. No, not his, not anymore. He had tried to push the thought away, but it lingered in the back of his mind, gnawing at him. When the test results came back, they confirmed what he had already known. Emma was not his biological child. The shock was still there, but it had dulled into a painful, aching numbness. But if Sarah thought this revelation would make him give up the fight, she was wrong. He had been there for Emma since the day she was born. He had held her tiny hand in his, watched her take her first steps, heard her first words. He had kissed her scraped knees and wiped her tears when she cried. Biology didn't matter. He was her father. The courtroom battles raged on for weeks. Every day, Ethan and Sarah sat across from each other, 2 people who had once shared everything, now locked in a bitter, soul-crushing war. Both their lawyers fought viciously, slinging accusations back and forth. Ethan's lawyer focused on Sarah's infidelity, her deception, her unfitness to be a mother. Sarah's lawyer, in turn, painted Ethan as a cold, distant man, too focused on his work to be a proper parent. But it was Sarah's revelation about Emma's true paternity that became the focal point of the case. Her lawyer argued that since Ethan was not Emma's biological father, he had no right to custody. Ethan's lawyer fought back, arguing that biology wasn't what made a parent love and care did. Ethan had been there for Emma from the beginning. He had raised her. He was her father in every way that mattered. As the weeks dragged on, the case became uglier. Ethan's lawyer uncovered details about Sarah's affair that painted her in an even worse light. Multiple infidelities, shady financial decisions, and questionable behavior that called her parenting into question.